kids would be more willing to come out if they were educated about what gender was when they were younger. Because if I was younger and my parents educated me on different genders and stuff, and some people feel this way and some people feel that way, then I'd be like, oh yeah, this is how I feel. And then I would be out already. The way I feel in my mind is not the way my body looks on the outside. So it's like if I'm standing and looking at a mirror, then I'm looking at somebody else and not myself.
What's in my brain is different from the rest of my body. So I naturally consider myself a man. I refer to myself with male pronouns. I've always seen Sydney as a male, but when I look down or I see the rest of my body, it does not compute with what my brain tells me.
I had dysphoria with a lot of other parts of my body.
Yeah.
You know, my genitals were never a piece that I was dysphoric about, but my chest was always something I was dysphoric about. And then, you know, my hips, there's a lot of different things. I won't go into all of them, but
Yeah.
I think part of what it was it's hard. I'm not saying it's easy,
Yeah.
but I think part of it is just like looking in the mirror and like acknowledging like this is what I have right now.
What did I do wrong in my life that you had to become this way? It's always, she always thought that it was her fault that I was this way. She's like, why do you have to bring this up on me? It's like, why can't you just stay the way you are? And she didn't speak to me for like a couple weeks. And we lived in the same house, so it was kind of hard. She would give me these looks. She just didn't want to talk to me because then she would have to face the reality of what I told her.
I did have a point where I wanted to talk to them about transitioning because I've always wanted to at least start transitioning ever since I figured out I was transgender. And when I told them, and I have done research into it and all sorts of stuff, and I came very close to starting hormones and all that jazz, but when I told my mother this is what I wanted, she told me she was not going to help me mutilate myself.
What could I have done wrong that my child is that way? Which sort of is proof positive that you did nothing wrong, it's just that's how the kid was born. So you should accept the fact that you did everything right, and that's how the kid was born.
His mom, she's a complicated subject because, like, just the other day when I was over at his place for an interview just yesterday, she was showing me pictures and she said, look, this is your girlfriend. And I was like, my boyfriend. And then she was like, doesn't he look so happy in these photos? And you could see in the photos, like, one thing I've noticed with trans people is when you see photos like pre-transition, they always look very uncomfortable, like always look like I'm in the wrong skin and I don't know why. And so I was like, he looks happier now. And she was like, I don't know.
I had to face the fact that I had to come out as liking women, which nobody ever does. You don't see cisgender men coming out as saying, oh, I love women. If they come out, they come out as gay.
Something that I learned about myself very early on when I was 13 years old was that I was attracted to trans women, in addition to being attracted to cisgender women. And so I didn't know what to make of it, and I thought that maybe it was just some kind of fetish.
Yeah.
So that was going to be something that I was just going to keep inside my own head, and I was never going to act upon, and certainly never tell anybody about. But then later in life, as I was approaching age 30 and finding that my dating life was not going the way it should have been going, the way I wanted it to, the way that felt right, I decided it was something I would have to pursue for my own mental well-being.
Yeah.
I would have to pursue transgender females. So,
And that was when you came out, right?
that was when I came out. The day after having my first date, with a transgender female, I said, okay, I'm not going to be living in the closet. I'm not going to be someone who's sort of doing this on the slide, because that was the reputation from everything I had read online, was that straight identifying males who have this proclivity tend to do it secretly. They live two lives, and that was certainly not something that I wanted to be doing.
You don't need to know when you're 4 years old or when you're 3 or 5 years old. You know, that doesn't make you any less trans. And like people struggle with that because they think, oh, I didn't know when I was younger, so that means I'm not trans. But that's not the case. You know, I found out when I was in high school, and that doesn't make me any less trans. But that's just because that's just how I developed. I developed differently than someone who knew when they were 4 years old and they were like, Mommy, I'm a boy.
I was a synchronized swimmer when I was in like middle school, and I liked the exercise. I loved swimming. What I didn't like was the way my body looked in a swimsuit. I thought, this is all kinds of wrong. And at the time, I thought it was just because I was a little chubby, I guess. I don't know. But after realizing that I was transgender, I realized it was the dysphoria that made me feel that like ugly feeling inside.
People inside the trans community and outside the trans community are not accepting. So people inside the trans community especially, so they're the kind of like hypocritical type of people that I've met, where they're like, I'm trans, so I deserve everything. And I don't want to think that way. I just want to be treated like everyone else.
There is a very large trans community online, and it's not that great. I mean, there are pockets of it where you can find other trans people, and they're very, you know, welcoming and warm and like nice to talk to, but there's a large chunk of that that's very toxic.
As a community, try to separate ourselves so much because we're trying to prove to people that it's a real thing for so long. And I found that when I started to try to bridge the gap with people, my life got a lot easier because I wasn't fighting with everyone, you know. And not that I'm doing it purposefully, not that I was like walking around trying to beat people up or mentally even, but it made it easier to deal with, you know. Because then I started not feeling so alone all the time, you know. It was like, oh, so you kind of can understand that, you know, even if you don't fully get it.
Something that I'm afraid of is that I'd go through like living my life where I'm not accepted as the man that I am. Like I would just have all these issues with other people, and you know, not just because the trans community is not as accepting as like the gay community or the lesbian community and stuff like that. Because it's like, it's easy with the gay community, you know, you just like another gender and we're done. But with the trans community, you're a completely different person. So people have to see you a specific way in order to accept you.
If someone tried to come up to me and say, your boyfriend is not a real man, Eric's not a real man, I would question their masculinity in the sense that they needed to say that to another man about another man.
Don't have that option. I will have to come out to the people that I work for and say, hi, I know I look like I'm a 16-year-old girl. I'm actually 21 and also a man. Please refer to me as a man. And the worst part is, even after I do that, most people don't listen. They'll continue to misgender me, and it's not surprising, but still disappointing.
Why always show people who are gay or transgender a certain way? They're just like everybody else. Show variety. There are men who are physically weak, heterosexual men, and there are heterosexual men who are physically very strong. But that's just different types of men. You know, I have no interest in picking up a gun and fighting. It doesn't make me less of a man, but in certain parts of America, I'll be seen as a weak man.
I believe I was born transgender. I've Doctors have told me that. I've read articles, like scientific articles that have said that this is not environment, this is not the media, nobody's making you do this. You just
My
can't
dad
fix
at
it.
one point told me, I wish that there was just a test you could take that would just like prove definitively that you're trans. That way we wouldn't have to think about it. We would just know. And I was like, but what would that change for you? You know, like, and he didn't give me an answer, but it's interesting that he even wanted that. He needed some external validation that it wasn't his fault.
There's some disagreement about what percentage of who I am is not influenced by culture. And this is one would think this is not a controversial idea, but for a lot of people, it is. People just think that we come into this world as a blank slate, which is absolutely categorically not true. We come into this world with certain kinds of predispositions from mommy and daddy, or whatever, two mommies and two daddies. And think of that as a kind of blueprint. And it's the culture around us that can turn on and off genes and make us a certain way. I mean, there's a particular kind of cognitive bias. It's called the availability heuristic. It's this idea that whatever is easiest for me to recall, right, influences my social reality. So if I see around me mostly straight men and straight women and people, men who dress a certain way, women who dress a certain way, it's easier for me to recall that and just say, that's just how people are. And then, I show up and I say, no, mommy, I'm a boy, but I want to dress like a girl. Then instead of recognizing that that's just how the kid is, they will just say, well, what is making my kid this way, right? So the availability heuristic then becomes this kind of, influencer that prevents the parent from recognizing that the child is just that way.
Dysphoria does not have to do with if you were touched weirdly as a child. It doesn't have to do with if your parents treated you a certain way as a child. It has to do with being trans and the fact that you're a human being existing in a body that doesn't match with the image you have in your mind. And finding the root of that in the past, I don't think really helps anyone. What you should do is discuss how you currently feel and come up with ways that you can slowly work against that and become more comfortable with your body.
You can't know somebody better than they know themselves, especially when it comes to being transgender. You cannot get into their head and see exactly what they're feeling. There is no checklist that's like, do you feel chest dysphoria every Monday? Done, you're transgender. That's not how it works. Parents who are teaching their children that it's okay to like girl things and boy things, or even better, that there is no such thing as girl things and boy things, are doing something great. I wish that more people did that.
But when it comes to who I am at my core, and if people don't even accept that, it's one thing if a parent says, don't dress that way, but it's quite another when somebody says, no, you are not feeling this is not who you are, you're just pretending to be different, right? That's the crap that some people believe, that clearly you're not like this, just don't hang out with these people, or don't, and you'll be okay.
I think you have to just be there for your partner like you would in any other relationship. That's really what it comes down to, because as human beings, no matter what, we all have all kinds of weird and interesting issues that we have to navigate. And I certainly can't pretend to understand at all what a trans person goes through.
What I feel is not wrong, and that we exist, and that we're not what you think we are in what you see online or in the media, or where we have all these kind of aspects of ourselves that you probably don't notice.